Hi, my name is Faith. I am filming this video kind of like for myself and for a lot of family and friends. I was pregnant last year with a baby who had a very rare defect, and I kind of kept that under wraps. I didn't want a whole lot of people to know. And my reasoning for that was it was very difficult to come to terms with the fact that I was having a baby with this defect and that my plans all went to shit. So I just didn't want to hear it from people who were like, oh, like it'll be okay, or like, there's a plan for this. Just was not something that I was comfortable with. So my son had gastroschisis, which is a very rare defect. I think there's like a 1 in 2,200 chance that your child could have this. And it is basically where their intestines float out of their body through a hole on the right side of their stomach. It's not super common, which is surprising because I know almost every person I've told is like, oh, I know someone with that. And so it's actually like we were told that if your baby's gonna have a defect, this is the one you want them to have because it's an easy fix. The survival rate is like above 90% in our country, and everybody was like, we know what to do with this. It's not something crazy where they're like, oh, okay, we don't know how to fix this. So it was just very taxing to know that he had this defect and that there's no known cause. So my brain said, that's your fault. So it just wasn't something that I wanted a whole lot of people to know about. He also was an unplanned pregnancy, and I was very adamant that I was child-free, that I wasn't going to have any children, and then I just didn't want to hear like, oh, you changed your mind, didn't you? Because I really didn't. I personally chose to keep my son, and I didn't want that to be used as like, everybody's going to change their minds so that they shouldn't be able to get sterilized. Anyways, wrong tangent here. But yes, he was unplanned. We got COVID in December on 2020. My entire family got it, and so we tested positive January 2nd, and so we went into quarantine immediately after, and Charles felt better within like a week. He was good. I still felt like crap 2 weeks later, and then I took another week off of work because my lungs just felt weird and I didn't feel good, and so I was like, I need a break. So I was gonna go back to work on a Thursday, and that was like, I think February 4th, and so February 2nd, Charles was like, hey, I'm on my way home. And then he gets home and he's like, okay, I'm gonna go to the gym. And I was like, why would you tell me that you're coming home if you're just gonna leave and go to the gym? Like, I was excited for you to be home. And I was really mad about it. So he was gonna stay home, and I was like, you know what, I'm in class, just go to the gym. So he left, went to the gym. We were like arguing about it a little bit. And so I was actually in class, so I just went and had to go to the bathroom, and I was like, let me just take a pregnancy test, just to see, because I was on birth control, and I was trying to get sterilized, which that was taking forever, and it wasn't a super high priority because I was on birth control. And so I took the test, and I just left it on the counter, and so I went back to my class, and Charles wasn't back yet, which was fine, and so after my class, I went to the bathroom again, and I happened to look at the test, and I was like, so I called my cousin Katie, and I was like, am I blind? Like, am I reading this correctly? And she looks at it, and she was like, girl, you pregnant? And so I'm freaking out because I don't know how Charles is gonna feel, and this is extremely unplanned. So I also texted my best friend, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant. Like, these are very clear lines. So I took another test, and that one was also positive. And then Charles came home, and so he came and bring me this stuffed fox, and he's like, hey, I'm sorry, I should have been more clear with my plans. And I was like, okay, awesome, that's great, but I need you to come look at something. And so he also had a pregnancy test in a bag because I'd been really bitchy, he said afterwards. And I was like, I don't think I need that. And he was like, what do you mean? So I showed him the 2 pregnancy tests that I'd taken, and he couldn't read them. He was like, I don't know what it says. So I grabbed the box and I let him read it, and he's like, oh, how do you feel about this? And I don't know, it was kind of exciting. It wasn't planned. I thought a part of me had always wanted kids, so I knew he had wanted kids when we got married. Like, we've been dating since we were 15, so I was like, and you know, he said that he was fine with whatever I chose to do, and I was like, well, I want to have it. Like, this is our baby. And so I scheduled the quickest appointment for the pregnancy resource center I could, which was Thursday when I was supposed to go back to work. So I made that appointment and I went, and they confirmed my pregnancy. I was really, really stressed out because I don't do well with doctor's visits. I have a really bad medical phobia, and I've been assaulted by providers, so I really would prefer to not have to see a doctor if I don't have to. But all I had to do was get a urine test, and they confirmed my due date as 10/17, which, if nobody knows this, it's 2 days before our anniversary, which was really exciting. I did, like, between then and our first ultrasound on March 10th, which was supposed to be when I was like 8 weeks, I did like break down like 4 times. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know, like, if I'm gonna be able to like have this baby and do all the doctor's appointments, because like I will put off injuries until like it's bad to avoid going to a doctor. And my cousin Katie and Charles were like, you can do this, you know, like if you want to make any decisions, you can, but like we're gonna encourage you, like, because that's what you want. You said you wanted it. So we went to the first ultrasound on March 10th, and I was extremely scared because I didn't want to do like any kind of pelvic exams or anything, and I didn't know if I was far enough along. And so I called them, and they reassured me that like they couldn't find it through my stomach. They would have to do another type, but I could deny it. So I was just really scared because Charles wasn't gonna be able to come. They told me my spouse couldn't come, and so I was just like absolutely terrified. So I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I'm like, I'm so scared. And then the door opens, and it's a childhood friend. And so I was really excited, and I was like, okay, I can do this. Like, it's Maria, I'll be fine. And so she actually let Charles come in, so he got to come in and see the baby. And I was actually a little bit further than we thought, so we moved my due date to 10/14, which still, babies can come 2 weeks either way. So it was really exciting, and it was nice, and I had like my first little ultrasound pictures on my little bean. So it was nice, it was exciting, and I was enjoying it. So I decided at that point that I wanted to have a home birth, because I went from wanting to have a scheduled C-section, I was like, take my uterus out at the same time, like, let's be done, to deciding that I wanted to have the most natural birth possible. Call me crunchy, call me crazy, whatever you want, like, that's what I planned. And so we looked at insurance coverage for it, and it was like, nope, gonna be too expensive. And I was like, oh, like, I really want to have a home birth. And so we talked to my parents, and we told my parents that I was pregnant because I was on their insurance, and I wanted to be able to utilize that because it's really good insurance. So we told my parents, which was absolutely terrifying. I'm married, was 24 years old, and was terrified my parents were gonna kill me. We actually took them to a Mexican restaurant thinking that if we told them in public, like, it'd be better. And then we go to the Mexican restaurant, and there was not a soul in there besides the staff. So I was really scared. They took it really well. They were really excited. They never thought they were gonna get grandkids because I was adamant I wasn't having kids, and my brother, we don't know what he's doing. But anyways, it's fine. So I actually went to Atlanta Birth Center's orientation on April 27th, and I wanted to get as much information as I could. I was about 15, 16 weeks at that point. Yeah, I really put off seeing a doctor just because I was scared, and I like was expecting a low risk birth, and I'd read about having like wild pregnancies where like you don't see a doctor at all. I knew I didn't want to go that far. So when I went to ABC's orientation, it was really great. They wanted me to see an OB now because I was past their normal intake, and they just wanted me to have my first round of blood work done and then maybe get another ultrasound. And so I scheduled an appointment for that Friday, which I think was the 29th or 30th of April, I can't remember. And so part of the reason I chose to have my baby at ABC was because CPMs can't practice home births in the state of Georgia. Georgia's pretty strict about its pregnancy and birth related stuff. So the original midwife I had been talking to, I couldn't have her, so I went to the next best. So on the 28th of April, I actually went back to PRC and got a second ultrasound because I was just like, I really want to see my baby. And so it had been so long, like over 10 weeks. So Marie was able to get me in on her lunch break, which I was so appreciative of. Marie's amazing. And he was so cute and perfect, and I was finally excited to be pregnant. Like, all of the stress was gone, all of my worry was gone. I was like, you know what, I can do this. This is gonna be great. It's gonna be easy. Like, I have the birth center, like, birth planned out. I'd already picked what room I wanted, and I was ready for all of that. So April 30th was my first OB appointment, and I was supposed to go get blood work done. And ABC said to tell them when I got there, hey, I'm planning to transfer to ABC. Like, I just want blood work and an ultrasound. So that was the worst day of my life. I had all these questions and stuff, and they didn't really answer them. Every time they took one of my vitals, they were like, I don't know if you can go to the birth center with that. Like, my blood pressure was a little bit high because I was nervous, and so they're like, don't know if you can go to the birth center with that. And then I forget what else they took, but they were just really negative about it. They were like, you're not going to transfer, basically. And so they did the ultrasound, and they actually like sat us in the hall afterwards, and I was like, this is a little weird, like all I need is blood work. And so then they took us to a private room, and the midwife that I had originally seen told us that he could have gastroschisis or umbilical, that it was too early to tell which one, and I would have to have a C-section. And basically just like gave us the paperwork for Southern Regional and told me to go see an MFM, a maternal fetal medicine specialist, Monday, because this was a Friday. And I'm holding back tears, fighting back tears. Charles is like, is she gonna be okay? And she said that if the MFM recommends it, if it's a severe enough case, to terminate. And I was like, wow, I am 16 weeks pregnant. Like, this is a lot, and not even in my realm of like what I'm okay with. And so it was very difficult. Like, that immediately ruled out ABC is where I was going to give birth. Like, I had to have a hospital birth. I had to have a C-section. And so Charles had to take off work the rest of the day. I actually had to have my cousin stay with me the next day. Charles was scared that I would myself, which that was never a thought. It's just, I don't handle stress really well. Like, I really need to like not be left by myself. Not that I'm like a risk, but it's just, I can spiral myself very quickly into panic attacks, and it's terrible. So yeah, that was very intense. Excuse my notes so I can keep everything straight. So the next Monday we called the MFM, and I'm at work extremely stressed out. Charles is having to call for me because I was working 5 a.m. to 3 p.m. and can't be on my phone. And so Charles is like trying to get an appointment, and they hadn't sent my paperwork over, so they wouldn't let me make an appointment. And so within all of that stress, Charles forgot to ask that I not see a man, because I definitely can't see a man. And so they made my appointment, and he texted me, and I was like, hey, you need to call back and make sure that like I'm not seeing a man. A whole game of telephone going on. He initially calls me, and he's like, look, you either see a man or we wait 4 weeks. And if we waited 4 weeks, we'd be at 20 weeks pregnant. And if they recommended termination, like, we'd have to go to Colorado to do that. And I just was like freaking out because I didn't want to have to consider any of it. And so Charles called the doctor back and was like, look, she'll see the man, but he cannot touch her, and she cannot be left alone in the room with him. Like, she cannot be alone. And so they agreed. So May 5th, a couple of days later, I get into the appointment. I have to go back by myself, and it was bad. They sent him into my room twice by himself, thinking I was another patient. And then a female tech did my ultrasound and confirmed, yeah, he's got gastroschisis. We don't see a membrane, so it's not on phalloceal. And I was like, cool. So I'm sitting there exposed, belly out, and he comes in and pushes me back and starts doing an ultrasound. And my trauma response from my assault is to freeze up. Like, I'm not gonna say no, I'm not gonna freak out. Like, I just freeze up, and doctors take that as consent, thus leading to more assaults. So it was terrible, and he said, you know, I don't recommend terminating because it doesn't look that severe right now, but we need to do a blood test, and if the blood test comes back with a bunch of comorbidities, like that should be consideration as well. So I consented to blood work, and he said if that comes back incomplete or with any indications, then we'll schedule an amniocentesis. I think that's how you say it. So I just called my mom crying because I wanted my brother. So I'm gonna cry again. I knew my brother couldn't fix anything, but he was deployed, and I was like, I need my brother. Like, my brother's who I want whenever I'm in like distress or like upset. And my mom's like, somebody has to die. I was like, Charles, you better take one for the team, dude. Like, I need my brother home. So it was really terrible and awful, and I didn't ever want to go back, but I had to make another appointment because like they needed to keep checking on the baby. And so around this time is when I got a doula. I'll explain more about that in a little bit. But the very next day after that appointment, I went to a women's health specialist in my area, and never even got seen because I was sitting in the waiting room and my paperwork wasn't getting sent over fast enough. So like, hey, go ahead and pee in a cup. We could just do your exams anyways. And I didn't think anything of that, so I went pee in a cup. And then we get back there and she's like, yeah, so they're not sending the results of your exam over yet. We would need to go ahead and just do it again. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not having it again. Like, I was traumatized. Like, I can't do this again. Like, I've been assaulted. I need my husband in the room with me, and they wouldn't let him in the room. So I was like freaking out. I didn't want to do it. I started crying because they're like trying to pressure me into it. They even called the nurse manager over, and I'm like, no, please stop. I don't want to do this. And so I was like, my husband's got to be in the room if you want to force me into this. And they wouldn't let him in the room. They were saying that like there'd be a nurse in there. And I'm like, do you realize how often nurses are complicit to doctor abuse? Not happening. So I actually ended up leaving and never getting seen because they just were fighting me about it. And so I actually the next day found my doula because I was like, I need a trauma-informed doula. Like, I need somebody in my corner backing me up. Like, and so I wanted a doula to help me make sure that like my requirements were met, like little touching, no men, stuff like that. And so I actually found a really great doula, and I hired her, and so she kind of walked through the rest of my pregnancy with me. And so a couple of days later, I actually found Mao Women's Healthcare in Roswell, and I decided that that was where I wanted to go because they were trauma-informed, had evidence-based practice, and they were high-risk specialized. So I was like, perfect, that's great. And so at the very first maternal fetal medicine appointment, they actually sent me to a pediatric surgeon to meet them to understand like what they would be doing about the gastroschisis. And so May 18th, on my brother's birthday, couldn't even call him. I had to go meet the surgeon, and I asked a ton of questions, got all the information, did all the research, and like there was a point that Charles was like, this is a lot. And I'm asking in-depth questions because if I focus on the science side of it, I can ignore that it's my baby. Because I as soon as we parked the car at Eggleston, I was just hysterical, like crying. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. So then the next day, I actually had one more appointment at the first maternal fetal medicine specialist where they did an anatomy scan and didn't tell me. And I was really upset because I wanted to go somewhere else so that Charles would be able to be there for the anatomy scan. And so without asking me, they tried to tell the gender, and they couldn't see it, thankfully, so they couldn't tell me because we didn't want to know. And so we were trying to get Charles to get in, and we actually ended up almost filing an injunction against them because I have an ADA accommodation for him to come in, and they just refused to accommodate. So we never went back. I even asked the doctor, why am I coming here if you're not going to help my baby? Like, what's the point? And they're like, oh, well, we just want to monitor him. And I was like, okay, well, what happens if you see anything going wrong? She's like, oh, well, we wouldn't do anything. We would just wait until, like, you have him. And I'm like, what's the point then? So I was just really angry. I had to come to terms with a lot of things, and it was very difficult. So I ended up finding a new specialist. But like 3 weeks later, I actually went to Nile Women's Healthcare. I was 21 weeks then, so I got all my blood work done. I had another ultrasound done. Got all my information, and they actually referred me to a new specialist, which I loved her. Excuse me. So that was a great specialist. I really enjoyed Not Women's Healthcare. So then a couple of days later, I think it was like a week later, I got to see Dr. Ransom. We looked at baby. She mentioned having like a 38-week induction, and I was like, no. Or I'm sorry, a 36-week induction. And I was like, no, because the evidence for his defect shows waiting until 38 weeks is best. Unless there's like extreme dilation or like something just looks really wrong, wait. And I really wanted to go into labor naturally. So that was actually the last time I saw a doctor for probably 2 weeks. I think the next time I saw a doctor was June 30th. And my appointment with Dr. Ransom was June 9th. So quite a bit of time. I met one of the midwives at Now Women's Healthcare. I really wanted to be with a midwife. And so they answered more questions about natural labor and all these other things. And I believe that's when I met one of my favorite midwives. So then it wasn't until July-ish. I only had 2 visits with a specialist that were really pressuring induction. It was just, I don't even think I saw my OB during July. It was just my pregnancy flew by. July 28th, we actually started our evidence-based birthing class, which was fantastic. I love that. I highly recommend evidence-based birth. But August 4th, I met the obstetrician who actually delivered my son, Dr. Davis. I declined the glucose test because I knew that I would throw up the liquid. So I just tested for 2 weeks. I was about 30 weeks along at this point. And so she said I needed to see only obstetricians from that point on. And I said, no. I actually met the rest of the midwives because I wanted the midwives to be there during my labor, and then like whoever, she can catch my baby, it's fine, whatever. And then August 18th, I met my favorite midwife, Brittany. I'm really sad she wasn't there to deliver my baby or be there. We talked about my perinatal depression that I said, okay, all of the symptoms of postpartum depression, what if I'm experiencing them now? And so she's like, therapy, please get into therapy. So I started looking for a therapist, and then we talked about the fact that in the gastroschisis support group, I received a hate message telling me to abort my baby or kill myself because I didn't want to induce at 36 weeks. And I asked, had anybody gone into natural labor with a baby with his defect? I wasn't going to not be induced at all if something went wrong, but just I wanted to know if like that was possible, if that was an option. And a lot of people were upset by that. They were very much, just listen to the doctor. And I don't know if you've ever met me, like I don't like being told what to do and being told that like I had to completely forgo every part of labor and delivery that I wanted. I was like, I'm no good to my son dead. Like if my labor and delivery is so terrible that like I sink into a depression, that's no good for my son. Like we can have a mutually beneficial labor and delivery. So that was in August, and then September 2nd, I actually almost didn't go to my maternal fetal medicine specialist because they stopped allowing spouses, because September 2021 was when COVID started ramping back up. And so they stopped allowing spouses, and I was like, no, I'm not going. Like he has to go with me. And so they actually, the doctor called me and was like, hey, please just one more visit, come in for one more visit. We'll see how it goes. I really feel like you need to come in. And so I was 34 weeks, I believe, at that point. And so I actually got sent in for monitoring for preeclampsia because I was eating nothing but pretzels. So my legs had swelled up and my blood pressure was high because they wouldn't let Charles in. So they tested my protein, all this other stuff. I was good, it was fine. I just had to cut back on the pretzels, there were no issues. So at this point, I'm having weekly appointments. I see my maternal fetal medicine specialist on Friday, and I go to my OB on Tuesday. It's a lot. And so it was actually causing a little bit of tension with Charles's job, which is a whole other can of worms. But September 9th, I met a new midwife, and I really liked her as well. And then my next appointment was on the 23rd. I had high blood pressure at that visit because Charles couldn't go. And so my MFM was actually mad that they hadn't been doing NSTs on me. And she was like, that's not good. Like, that's an issue. And so she really wanted me to deliver my baby on the following Monday. And I was like, I'm not ready to have my baby. I'm 37 weeks. Like, really just want to try to make it a full term. And so I was self-checking my cervix. So I knew that I was 2 centimeters dilated and having semi-regular contractions. Like, a lot of people would have already gone to labor and delivery thinking that they were in labor with those types of contractions, but I knew that they weren't actual labor. So I really put it off, and September 27th, I did decide to go in for my induction at 11 a.m. And it was a good induction. I asked to see the doctor as soon as we got in, and I was like, hey, remind me why I'm doing this. Like, why am I here? And she's explaining, you know, that like my blood pressure is getting a little bit too high. It's like bordering preeclampsia. I'm not having any other symptoms, but it is worrisome. And McClellan's bowel was getting like a little bit dilated. And I was like, you know what? He's perfect right now. Let's go. Let's do this. So at 2 p.m. on the 27th, I got my first dose of Cytotec, which knowing what I know now, just anyways, it's a whole other tangent. And then at 7 p.m. I got my second dose, and then labor hit me like a truck. By 8 p.m. my water broke, and it didn't register to me that my water had broke at first because I just like stood up and it happened. And then I was moving around a whole lot, which was irritating the nurse because McClellan was coming off of the wireless monitoring and they didn't like that. And I was like, no, like I'm going to keep moving. And so at 10 p.m. I actually asked for IV pain medication because I was having really severe back labor and I was not tolerating it well, because they were like trying to force me into the bed. So I kept getting up and down into the bathroom, and they just were not liking that. So I got my second dose of IV pain meds at 1 a.m. in the morning, and they were really pressuring me to do a cervical check so that I could get my second dose of IV meds, and I was like, fine. And I screamed, do not recommend it, you can decline, don't let them force you. Anyways, and then by 2 a.m. they were pushing an epidural and Pitocin. And I was like, no, I am clearly on track, like for labor. I don't need Pitocin, you're not giving me that, and I don't want an epidural. And so my back labor got worse, so much worse, and they were trying to keep me in the bed because of the IV pole, and it was a bad time. So at 4 a.m. I finally consented to an epidural because they were like kept putting me back in bed, and I just could not do it. So at 4:30 they put the epidural in, and I like started having a panic attack about the catheter because I could feel it. Like my epidural was not numbing it, I could feel it, and I was flipping out. I was like, either you get it out or I rip it out. Like, it's coming out. And so at 5 a.m. they gave me an Ambien so I would chill out because I was like starting to ramp myself up. And it was a lot. So I literally slept for an hour. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I woke Charles up and I was like, babe, Charles. And I woke him up and I was like, I need to poop or I'm going to die. Like right now, help me get up, take the IV out, like we gotta go. The only reason I did not have my son in the toilet was because the IV pole was locked. Otherwise I would have been up and on the toilet. So I was like freaking out. And so they actually asked me if they could check my cervix, and I said, I have to poop, like let me up. And so all she did was look, and she said, I'll be right back with the doctor. And so 2 other nurses came in and they're like, hey, they just wanted to check. She said, like, you're getting ready to have your baby. And they went, yeah, so we're gonna get you ready to go. And I'm like, are you telling me I'm about to have a baby right now? And so they were like, oh no, he's there. Like, he's there. And I asked, does he have hair? And they're like, yeah, he's got a lot of hair. And so they're trying to put me in the stirrups. And I was like, no, I don't want to be on my back. Like, I want to get up. Like, my epidural's not working. And so they're like, the doctor doesn't like for patients to not be in stirrups. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And so the OB came in and she's like, look, you might be able to hold him if you get in stirrups. And I said, okay, get me in stirrups, because I was told I wouldn't be able to hold them at all. And that was devastating for me, because I had planned like such a natural birth of like lotus birth, delayed cord clamping, not bathing, all these other things. I was gonna hold my baby. So I had him at 6:11 in the morning. It was 7 minutes of pushing. I only pushed 4 times. Anyways, it was great. And so she actually did let me hold him, and all I could think about was, don't let me squish his balls, don't let me squish his balls, don't let me squish his balls. And that's how I knew he was a boy. So it was very exciting, and I was very happy. We suspected that he was a boy just from genomic markers, and I just had a feeling he was a boy. We wanted a girl so bad. So I can hear him screaming. They took him from me around 6:15, because his defect. That was really hard, really rough. And so by 8 a.m. I was like, yeah, so I'm gonna leave, right? And they were like, let's get a doctor to talk to you. So they put off sending a doctor in my room until I think it was like 11 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, I'm ready to leave. Like, let me leave. And so the doctor and I went back and forth about when I could leave. And he was like, can you wait till 7 p.m.? And I was like, no, I want to leave it like right now. He's like, well, what about like 5 p.m.? Could you do that? And I was like, 3. And he's like, I really would like you to stay till 5. You know what? He's like, if you can do X, Y, and Z by 5, you can leave. I did X, Y, and Z by 5, and at 5 o'clock I opened my door and I said, who's walking me out? So I left, and it was a very, very painful ride from North Fulton Hospital to Eccleston. It was about an hour. And so we get there, and it's like 7 o'clock, and the nurses hear me say that I'm here for him, and they're like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm here for my son. And they were like, you just had him. And I was like, yeah, 12 hours ago, where is he? So they were very surprised that I was there. And then they let me see him. He was beautiful. He was so precious. It was just, I could see his intestines, and it was very difficult. They had him placed in a silo, which I will share pictures on Instagram of what that looked like, or you can look it up yourself. But yeah, I'm ultimately okay with my birth, even though it wasn't like as natural as I wanted. I was able to hold my son, which was my biggest concern, and his size was perfect. Yeah, it was really great. I actually found out later that he had a nuchal cord that they just like slipped off his head. That's very common, that's very normal. But he didn't scream at first, and that really freaked me out. So I was like, why is he not screaming? And she's like, he's fine, he's okay. And they actually let me see him before they transferred him to Eccleston, which was really nice. And they called me when he got to Eccleston, but I was asleep. That Ambien kicked in hard after I'd had him. But yeah, it was very interesting. But if you made it this far, thank you for watching. I'm gonna make a second video about his NICU stay and kind of some things that happened there. Since his defect is so rare and that there's not a whole lot that's like normal because it's so variated. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for understanding why I didn't want to publicize this while pregnant or talk about it a whole lot. I was really, really struggling. I'm only okay now because I've been in therapy for almost a year. And it was a lot of working through the guilt that I experienced, thinking that I caused it or that I had done something, that like I was being punished. A whole other can of worms, like I said before. But yeah, he's great now. He's almost 10 months old, but yeah, thank you.